Good morning or evening or wherever you're at out there in internet land. We got a good one for you today. June's monthly build is admittedly a little bit late due to some unforeseen shipping delays, but it's just the beginning of July, so I hope you guys can forgive me. This month's build wouldn't have been possible without my friends over at Cooler Master, who had the idea of not only putting together a baller gaming rig, but also the full desk setup to go with it. As a result, this month's build will be a little bit different than what you're used to, as I'm going to have to break it up into two parts to avoid some gangly 28-minute monstrosity. But hopefully the end result is worth it for you guys, and maybe you could get some ideas for your next build or battle station when it's all said and done. So let's dive right into part one, introduce you to all these parts I have here in front of me, and then get to screwing. Like putting stuff together. The case screws. Come on! When Cooler Master first floated the idea to me of this project and said they wanted a black and red build, I was very, I mean, black and red has been done to death, and we like doing stuff here that's at least moderately original. Plus, I just did a black and red build last month in that video. But when I started putting together a theoretical parts list using a few choice Cooler Master components, I pretty quickly changed my mind. For starters, we're going to be building in the Mastercase Maker 5T, the tempered glass version of last year's Maker 5. The TG variant was released at the end of the year to rave reviews, but I haven't yet had a chance to get my hands on it for testing except while browsing through the Build Your Own PC section at Micro Center. The red accenting on the case panels and interior is extremely well done, and the case ships with a bunch of accessories you usually have to add to your cart separately. Of course, you get an LED strip because this is 2017, but you also get a GPU support bracket that bolts directly to the back wall. You also get this remarkably sturdy carrying handle which can support a fully bolt-out system up to 62 pounds and comes in way more handy than you might think, especially during the build process. The motherboard tray in the Mastercase may not be specifically designed to handle an EATX motherboard, but we're going to try to squeeze this beast in there. This is the EVGA Z270 Classified K, their flagship motherboard for the Intel Kaby Lake line. It sports all the bells and whistles, including a 13-phase power delivery and two 8-pin EPS connectors for max overclocking, onboard power and reset switches, U.2 connectivity, dual LAN ports, and no RGB LEDs. The board's black PCB along with the brushed metal accents will fit right into our theme, and it's going to look great sitting in the chassis. For processing power, we're going to lean on what is still just about the fastest chip you can buy for gaming, and without a doubt the smartest choice if you're targeting the highest frame rates at the most reasonable price. Intel's Kaby Lake 7700K is still my recommendation for the vast majority of people when it comes to these types of applications, as although the new 7740X may technically be clocked slightly higher and can definitely achieve some nice overclocks, the performance difference here is minuscule, while the amount you have to invest in the X299 ecosystem will be substantial. Not to mention you lose the onboard GPU, which is essential for things like troubleshooting. Of course, as this is an unlocked Intel SKU, it doesn't come with a cooler, so we'll need a way to remedy that. Meet the largest and coolest looking air cooler I've ever seen, the Master Air Maker 8. Two fans sandwich an oversized heatsink which is connected to the copper base plate via 4 heat pipes. The heat pipes are anchored to a vapor chamber where liquid turns to gas when heated. The gas then rises through the heat pipes, transferring their heat to the pipes themselves and then out onto the radiator fins where it is dissipated by the cool breeze of the fans. This vapor chamber design is rated for up to 250 watts of cooling capacity, meaning that our measly 91-watt processor should be no problem. Pushing the pixels will be Gigabyte's GTX 1080 Extreme Gaming. This card is identical to the newer Aorus branded Extreme Gaming 1080 from Gigabyte, right down to the enormous cooler and clock speeds. The only difference between the two is branding, as this card doesn't feature the Aorus Eagle. Both cards are still available, so if you're trying to choose between the two, just pick the one that's cheaper. This 1080 sports a triple fan cooler design and runs remarkably chilly and quiet. In fact, even when gaming sometimes, Gigabyte's fan stop technology will kick on, as the card isn't even above 50C. With base and boost clocks of 1784 and 1936 MHz respectively, this is a serious piece of gaming hardware. Seeing as my Corsair Dominator Platinum memory was unceremoniously booted from my Ryzen workstation a month ago in that video, I wanted to give it a better home. Although I do have some concerns about clearance given the size of our CPU cooler, I'm hoping we can get these DIMMs in here as they provide not only lightning fast performance and tight timings, but also a nice splash of accent coloring. I do have some other memory kits on hand ready to step in, just in case we can't fit these in the build. Now, speaking of a splash of color, Senpai Studios has provided these red and silver cable extensions to help pimp our PC. Whether you're referring to Joe as Sanctum Sleeving, the artist formerly known as Modders Inc., or his new company Senpai, he always does the best work. Our SSD for this build will be the only thing that doesn't match our color scheme, but that's okay because we're going to strip it naked for the world to see before we install it. The Western Digital Blue SSD is a newer product from a highly trusted brand, and 1 terabyte of storage should be plenty for our needs. Now we'll need something to make sure we don't run out of juice both now and in the future if we decide to go SLI or turn this whole thing into a mining rig, so the Cooler Master V1000 should be more than up to the task. Although likely slightly overkill here, the V1000 is fully modular and 80+ gold rated. It also comes with dual EPS cables to power our EVGA board to the fullest. So what we're gonna do is put this bad boy together in your classic PC build time lapse and give you guys a nice look-see at the finished product with some sexy B-roll. I'll do a quick outro discussion on the build process, and then part 2 will have performance numbers along with the rest of our full desk setup. Onward. complications with the build process, which is always a welcome development. Although there are definitely a couple of things I wanted to touch on. First, as you guys probably saw in the build time lapse and then in the showcase shots afterwards, I had to swap out the memory kit not once, but twice. The first time was due to what I unfortunately predicted in the intro. The Dominator Platinum DIMMs just can't fit underneath the fan of the Master Airmaker 8, even when the fans are in the topmost position. Given that I had thought this was a possibility, I had a kit of G.Skill Trident Z RGB memory on hand and ready to go. Clearance here was pretty tight, but they fit without any issue, and we proceeded with the build as planned. Unfortunately, once I got everything together and was installing all the necessary RGB control software in Windows, the G.Skill RGB software would not recognize that I had any of their modules installed at all. This meant that I had a perpetual RGB blob right in the middle of our ominous looking red and black rig, and this just wasn't going to fly with me, so I swapped in a third kit of memory, HyperX Savage, and that seems to be doing just fine. I'm a little perturbed at G.Skill for this botched rollout of what should be a fantastic product. Trident Z RGB was released in February without any software, and we were supposed to get version 1 in March. Well, it's July, and all that's been released so far are beta versions, which clearly do not work correctly on all motherboards. I tried all 3 different beta releases, and none of them would recognize the G.Skill DIMMs at all. If we were working with an ASUS board, their RSync software does a good job of controlling these LEDs, but this EVGA board doesn't have those kinds of controls. I think it's about time G.Skill got its act together with their software release. Secondly, and this is my fault entirely, I forgot to request 2 8-pin EPS extensions from Senpai Studios instead of the normal one. As I did want to take advantage of this board's overclocking potential, I had to use the stock cable for one of them, and it's just not as pretty. Given that this is tucked up in the corner of the main compartment, I don't think it causes much issue, but I still would have liked to have everything matching. Third, as with my previous Cooler Master build, I wanted a better way to showcase the 24-pin cable, and as a result I extended it out farther than the cable routing grommet and tucked it in behind the accessory bar. This not only allowed the cable to remain parallel with the bottom portion of the chassis, as opposed to kind of having to angle it upward to hit the grommeted opening, but it also gives it a good 2 or 3 inches of visibility. Lastly, due to a weird confluence of circumstances, I was unable to connect the front panel USB 3.0 headers. EVGA locates their headers at the bottom of the board instead of the right side, which is usually no problem. They also decided to flip them 90 degrees so they face down instead of out at you, which is also usually not a problem. The Maker 5T has a solid metal divider panel right below the motherboard, which is also not usually a problem. However, the combination of these 3 things meant that there was no room to plug in the front panel cable. A 90-degree adapter would work here, as would taking a Dremel to the divider and cutting another opening. As I talked about in the opener, we did squeeze an eATX motherboard into a standard ATX chassis here, so I'm not surprised that something was a little off. If this was my or somebody else's personal build, there are certainly ways around this issue that aren't that complicated that unfortunately I just didn't have the time to explore. Alright, well that's a wrap on the first half of June's monthly build. Stay tuned for part 2 where we'll talk overclocking, performance, and dive headfirst into my first ever desk setup video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of this build so far, and how you think it might perform. Also, don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you're not already so you don't miss my upcoming 10,000 subscriber giveaway. As always guys, thanks for watching.